We are live on LinkedIn and YouTube. Our topic today is Drill Baby Drill, Pros and Cons. Welcome, Professor Cleveland Jones. This is the LinkedIn page of Professor Cleveland Jones.
Nice to be
Well,
with you again, Cavagna.
that's great. Professor Cleveland Jones asked me to not talk about tariffs, Trump's tariffs. Okay. That's a
Let's
good
leave
one.
it for another time.
Another time. It's not
There
the
will
good
be a
time to
lot of
talk about
news
this.
in the coming days and weeks.
Yeah, that's right. We have five pros and five cons related to this expression drill, baby, drill. You may have another point, please bring to us,
Yeah.
Professor, no problem. And the audience can send comments via chat. Let's analyze each one, starting with this first one. Let me put a big screen here. Uh, the first point is a positive point. So the United States wanted to reduce the dependence on oil imports, make the country less vulnerable to external crimes. And the point is the consumption of United States is 20 million barrels per day, export 4 something, import 7 something, and only for comparison, China imports 10 million barrels per day. Professor, you see that's a good point to drill more wells and to explore more?
Yeah, okay. It's important to separate a wishful thinking type mantra. Drill baby drill is indicative of a pro fossil fuel stance. But in terms of reducing dependency, I think there's a fundamental misconception about energy independence. Energy independence is not achievable, nor is it desirable. What countries, including the United States, can try to achieve or improve is energy security. Because energy security presupposes that the country produces a sufficient amount that it won't be under dire stress if there is an upheaval in the world and so on. And it also presupposes that there are markets in the world to take the exports of the US, both oil and gas. So energy independence is a misnomer that doesn't even fit in a conversation, in a rational conversation about energy. What we need to seek is energy security, and indeed, some of the drill baby drill policies could help that in the long run if you know that opens up certain areas and eventually production increases and so on. But that is not going to happen for 3 years or maybe more, because that's how long it takes for new projects to actually come into being. Different from the shale patch, but the shale patch is already going well and it doesn't need any more incentives and it's not really under any duress or any restrictions. So DBD doesn't really matter too much for the shale patch. So I don't know what can be achieved here. I wouldn't consider it a pro because it doesn't actually do much, but that's my thoughts.
And what's the reason they export 7 million barrels per day and import products and more crude oil? Is a kind of refinery profile?
Yeah. This is a similar situation that we have, for example, in Brazil, where the similar mantra, oh, we're independent. Why isn't gasoline prices low? Look, it depends on the profile of the production of oil, heavy oil, light oil, sour oil, sweet oil. The refineries are built over many years to refine a certain mix, and that includes heavy oil from Canada and from Mexico. It used to include from Venezuela. You can't absolutely substitute all of that with shale oil. It just doesn't work. So this question of becoming independent, not unless you change all of the refinery complex, which takes 10 years. So
Okay.
it's a misnomer, and the reality is that the oil industry is a complex mixture of upstream, where the production takes place, and downstream, where the refining produces the fuels that the country uses and needs. So it's a very difficult balancing act, and you cannot change it very quickly. Unfortunately, that is more or less set because refineries can only very slightly alter their ideal operating regimen.
Perfect. Perfect. Let's go to the point number 2. Sorry. The oil and gas industry creates direct and indirect jobs, boosting local economies. They see, let me amplify this, that there was 130,000 people employed in the oil and gas exploration in the U.S. in 2023. But the number is, I suppose, the number is bigger than this one.
Yes, by far. But again, it's very easy to lie with numbers. Statistics are great to give a false impression of things. Look, yes, the oil industry in the U.S. is a very important industry, the oil and gas industry, very important, and obviously generates a lot of jobs, generates wealth, generates income for people and so on. But you have to keep that in perspective. The oil and gas industry, as important as it is, basically is like, for example, the automobile industry. Of course, it generates jobs. You can't have an industry without jobs. The question is, which industry generates more jobs per amount of revenues produced or dollars of production? So the oil and gas industry is not really that good at generating a lot of new jobs. And in fact, other industries, including alternative energy industries that were proposed under the IRA, can provide even more job generation. So you have to be very careful. Yes, of course, it generates jobs. And if you increase oil production, you are likely to increase jobs. But maybe you could increase jobs even more by providing incentives for some alternatives, which even the Republicans and Trump seem to be in favor of, like geothermal and nuclear, and even wind energy generates jobs. Of course, it's a negative for them, but it does generate jobs. So it's very important to consider the amount of jobs generated in relation to the industry revenues. And the oil and gas industry is traditionally good paying jobs, but maybe not as many as could be generated in alternative projects.
And there is a point here. It's not only oil companies' jobs, but service providers' jobs, first-tier providers and second-tier providers, the network of the industry itself.
Yes, but Kamaya, that is true for almost all of these other industries. The suppliers and the service providers of the auto industry, of the wind energy. It's not just the blades from China or Europe or whatever. It's also domestically produced. It's also the guys who install the equipment, and it's also the people who supply the equipment.
Maintenance, operation.
You have a whole line of second and third and fourth tier suppliers that are involved. So it's very difficult to say, oh, but there's a multiplier effect. Most industries have a multiplier effect, and it's very difficult from a macroeconomic standpoint to actually calculate what the multiplier is. Is it 2.3? Is it 3? Is it 1? In the oil industry, yes, there are supplier and service companies that can provide additional jobs. But even if you accelerate some exploration, the most of the jobs don't come from there, comes from later development and production side. So that may not happen for several years.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, going to the point number 3, royalties and tax on extraction. Of course, but that, as you said, so it takes time. If you decide today to increase the drill operations again. So it takes 3, 4, 7 years to start
Yeah. I
recovering
don't
money.
I don't mean to disqualify all the pros, even though I've mostly brought some uh, sobering points. But government take in the oil industry in the U.S. is among the lowest in the world. And Trump even talks about lowering taxes. So the government take from the oil industry is much less significant than for many other industries, including, for example, from uh, industrial sector that could be promoted by the energy itself. So the government take and the effects in the economy aren't necessarily um, tied to royalties and so on, which in the US are minimal, even in exploration leases. For example, when they have bidding rounds for blocks in the Gulf of Mexico, excuse me, Gulf of America, in the Gulf or onshore, very low cost for bidding on those blocks. In relation, for example, to Brazil, where you saw even just a few years ago some of the pre-salt blocks being bid by, including American companies, in the $1 billion range for one block. In the US, we're talking tens of thousands for a block. So, royalties and government take, that is maybe true for a very small part of the pie, piece of the pie. But really, what you're looking at is economic effects of energy production. And that is, down the line in the economy. So again, very slow multiplier effects that are difficult to guess. And I would suggest that other industries could probably do as well or more.
Yeah. It's interesting because some cities in Brazil live with this royalties money. It's impressive
Yes,
how important
exclusively even, or
royalties are.
almost exclusively, because
Exactly.
70% of their budgets from royalties. That is not the case that I know of in any jurisdiction in the U.S., even in Louisiana, all
Yeah.
those places that have Gulf production and
Yeah.
leases all
Perfect.
the time.
Perfect.
And even into the future, when Trump talks about putting new areas up for grabs in national sanctuaries or wherever, yes, you would put new areas, you would let them out to bid, and you'll get a couple $1 million, but that's an
Yeah.
infinitesimal amount of money in any case. That is insignificant.
Perfect. Going to the point number 4 for us. Increased production can reduce fuel and energy prices. Yeah, long term, maybe a little bit, but depends on
Yeah.
other factors, geopolitics issues, and not only volume
Well,
of production.
we've all heard this 3-3-3 policy objective of the Trump government. Actually, it's 3-3-1. 3% increase in GDP, 3 million barrels of production a day more, 3% deficit reduction, and the one is $1 a gallon gasoline. They're all basically impossible. And if the oil industry looks at this, they tear their hair out. They don't want to see $1 gasoline. Who's going to make money on this? If the oil industry is backing a lot of the drill baby drill to achieve this kind of target, to increase production by 3 million barrels a day, impossible in the near term. This could be very disruptive for the oil and gas industry itself, because even if Trump pushes exports more, by threats or whatever, there's still going to be a lot of disruptions. Economics is the law of economics. You can't violate that. If there's a lot of new supplies, it's going to be difficult to prevent prices from going down, because the demand can go up, but only slowly. And, inelasticity makes, if supply goes up, makes prices go down. So
Uh-huh.
if indeed they were to achieve much lower fuel prices, that may be good for consumers. It's very unlikely, but that would be terrible for the oil industry itself. So I'm not sure, what are we trying to do? Help the oil industry or help consumers, or neither? Because this might actually end up being bad all around.
Mhm.
So this pro, I think, is a very dangerous pro, or maybe even
Mhm.
a con.
Perfect. Yeah. Going to the point number five, but of course you can have more pros
Yeah.
that you can bring. But this one is a innovation, technology that more exploration can bring, specifically more in hydraulic fracking and deep
Uh,
water. How do you see
yeah.
this?
Yes. The oil industry has been exceptionally good at technological innovations, lowering costs, becoming more efficient. It's already doing that.
Yeah.
It's not one, two, or
Not
three
depends
million
on drill
barrels a day
more
more
drills. Yeah.
that's going to change any of this. And fracking will go up as needed, not
Yeah.
because of incentives of a mantra. So this is happening. It has happened, and I think it can continue to happen because
Yeah.
even artificial intelligence, and you and I have discussed this before in terms of new technologies that could alter the playing field. Artificial intelligence is really a very potentially significant uh, player in the technology, bringing efficiencies and cost reductions and so on. But they don't depend on additional oil and gas production. The incentives are there already, and they're coming as fast as AI can be absorbed by the industry, because now it's not a question of them deciding to absorb. It is how they can absorb it. It takes time to understand how this can actually benefit the oil and gas industry, and they're doing all they
Yeah.
can. So this is a pro, but it's not necessarily helped by DPD. It's going to happen anyway.
Do you have any other pros that you
Yeah, I
would
think I
like to
wanted
add?
to comment that, when we talk about increasing oil production, as part of the 333 type of thing, this might not really be achievable even maybe within 3 or 4 years, but it's eventually possible. The only thing is that we should separate out gas from oil. And in terms of gas production, I think the U.S. still has a much brighter future in terms of production increase, and indeed in converting that into LNG and converting that into exports, which
Yeah.
were already, as we discussed 1 or 2 programs ago, that
Yeah.
LNG, the U.S. is the dominant player in the world, and it will remain the dominant player, even without Trump threatening anybody to import more LNG. It will be. In fact, I think the danger is that if there's a lot of threats, maybe that can serve the opposite effect. Countries don't want to import LNG under threat. And you already saw China reducing its commitments to US LNG as a result of this fracas. So I think that the gas prospects are great, and they can improve even as long as, the U.S., or particularly President Trump, controls some of his more outlandish comments, because that is where the U.S. can shine quickly and significantly, because LNG production can grow a
That's,
lot.
that's a good point. But when he refers to increase drilling, he's I understand that he is talking about shale gas and things like that. Less deep water, less land,
Well, I don't
offshore
know. I don't know,
exploration.
Trump. I don't think he's referring to actual drilling. In fact, exploration is the first step. You're going to drill without exploration. So obviously, it's just a mantra, and I understand that it's a mantra in favor of fossil fuels. That being understood,
Good.
you can't take it literally. But if that is the case, I think there are potentially very significant pros. In fact, the reduced restrictions, or the simplification of licensing for oil and gas pipeline which were very difficult to get licensed in the Democrat government of Biden. That could actually spell a debottlenecking for the oil and gas industry, especially in the shale patch. And that alone can probably have a much more significant effect than any of Trump's comments or threats
Yeah.
or asking to
Right.
increase
Right.
exports from the U.S. That is what can debottleneck the industry along the Gulf. And then you could see shale gas production be freed up, because right now it's basically constrained by takeaway capacity. And some of the projects that are being advanced now could dramatically change that.
Uh-huh. Let's go to the cons. Okay, spills, water pollution, air pollution. Do you see that increased drilling can cause these problems?
Well, I think when we say this, we're talking about environmental impacts, negative environmental impacts of the oil industry. The oil industry has been aware of these impacts for a long time, ever since the major accidents, and not just recently, or the Horizon or the Valdez. Recently, the oil industry has no resemblance to the oil industry of 10, 15 years ago. It is a different industry. It is much safer in terms of safety
Yeah.
for its workers, and much safer in terms of environmental impacts, because it has learned from its mistakes, and it is
That's right.
spending money on making sure that it doesn't have a
And
major mishap.
technologies, controls, sensors, and things like that too.
Exactly. And you can be sure that it's Republicans in Louisiana or Mississippi or whatever, if there were to be a major accident, that will be screaming at the companies. So it is not a partisan issue. Everybody wants to avoid a major environmental mishap, whether it's offshore or onshore. So
No.
those are risks that are inherent to the oil and gas industry, and they have been, I believe, significantly mitigated, and I would even say adequately mitigated, in relation to the technology that is available.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
that being said, obviously the oil and gas industry still has risk for employees and for its workers and so on.
Yeah.
But like many other industries, including the construction industry in the
Perfect.
U.S., which has a
Good
worse
analysis. Very good.
record, they do what they can. The oil
Yeah.
industry is doing a good job.
Yeah. Let me show a comment from Steve Cleveland. Great information. Do you know
I
his?
think we have to keep in mind some of these things, because it's very easy to demonize, as many people have demonized the nuclear industry, and you and I have spoken about how safe
Yeah.
it is. And the same thing with the oil and gas industry.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
right.
we can't forget the past issues, but looking forward, and all of the major oil companies have done this.
Yeah.
It's not
It's okay.
that they're thinking about this just because of going green. They're thinking about this from a
Yeah.
business sense. They don't
And
want to
there
be
is
liable for
an
billions
accumulation
of
of
dollars.
experience. Yeah, accumulation of experience, and the industry is applying this knowledge. Yeah. The
Exactly.
second point, burning fossil fuels release CO2. Global
Okay,
warming. What do
now,
you see?
Yeah, I'm an environmentalist, but I will be the first to say that even though it is true that fossil fuels emit CO2 and greenhouse gases, and climate change may indeed be related to anthropogenic emissions, that I believe is not the major concern. We have biodiversity loss, we have habitat loss, we have sanitation being a major problem in urban areas as well as in rural areas. We have desertification across the globe. We have water scarcity. These environmental problems are imminent. Just because we have some storms and they may be associated to some extent, as ongoing studies seem to show, with warming temperatures and greenhouse gases, I think we have to put things in perspective. And I said this in a program long ago, I believe that eventually we will be able to capture with CCS and even with DAC, direct air capture, a lot of CO2 to save the world if that were to really be a problem. Not right now, maybe 10, 15 years from now. And we have that time, even if people are alarmist and say this is tomorrow and so on. No, we have urgent environmental problems, and the oil industry is addressing them. It's addressing its environmental footprint in forest areas, in the sea. It's addressing its emissions with carbon capture and storage projects. This is the way to go.
It's a very good technology that let's see, this technology is growing very fast and will solve some problems.
Sure.
Perfect. Number 3, safety, operational safety, accidents, like BP spill in the Gulf of Mexico 2010. But it's inherent to any industry, not specifically for oil and gas. Having nuclear, having
like
wind.
We point to nuclear accidents all the way back from 3 Mile Island to the Russian problems and so on. These things happened, and they happened because the world was becoming used to a new source, and it takes time for them to react.
And Professor, we need to avoid, we need to mitigate, and we need to have contingencies for these problems.
And the oil industry does. I think it's the most prepared industry in the world among all industries to deal with accidents. In fact, I believe that it is a major safety cushion for a lot of accidents from other industries because it has preparedness that very few other, that no other industry has.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, the competition between investments in renewable comparing to the oil sector. Do you see this competition?
Yeah, well, actually, I believe there is competition for investment dollars. There's no question that even, if Trump or Western Europe say that they want to invest X amounts in fossil fuels in the US or alternative energies in Europe, the amount of investment dollars is limited. So obviously there is some competition, but that is mostly regional because Western Europe, the European Union especially, will probably continue to pour dollars, maybe more than I would suggest, into alternative energies or green energies. And those dollars will not go into the fossil fuel industry. The same way, the US is likely to plow a lot of money into fossil fuels, the oil and gas industry, and it has already seen a significant reduction in investment plans by many of the oil majors in green energies and clean energies and so on. I think that is not a policy induced by Trump. It's a recognition of realities. Clean energies don't provide the kinds of returns that oil and gas does.
But the point is, do we have a cap to invest in energy, a value cap, or no, not?
And in fact, the cap is so much higher than current investments because many analysts have suggested that in order to avoid energy constriction in 5 years or 10 years, we need a lot more investment. And we're not investing as much as we need.
If do we have this cap, so invest more in oil and gas, reduce the investments in renewable. That's the logic that this thought are bringing to us.
But again, now that is a very simple thing. One thing is the dollars. The other is what the dollars produce. So investment dollars into the oil and gas industry, fossil fuel industry, are very productive. Investment dollars in clean energies
wind, for
require
instance,
10 times more capex for the same energy. So on average, some are only 2 times more, some are 10 and 20. So yes, The problem is that the dollars may go to one and to the other, but if they go to the fossil fuel industry, things will be easier in terms of energy availability as
Yeah.
needed 5, 10 years from now. If they go into new energies, that may be difficult. But
Yeah.
there, another point has to be made, and you know that I've made this. I think technology is a savior. 5 years from now, technology will
Okay.
drastically reduce the cost of some of these energies,
Yeah,
not
but with some
necessarily fossil
limitations.
fuels.
Yeah, but some limitations. There is a curve. There
Yeah,
is a asymptotic curve.
yes. So,
Let me
so there will
show.
be a trade-off, and we've seen this.
Yeah, perfect. William Brown saying that different oil and gas industry in the USA in pipeline transportation, the U.S. regulations and implementation of pipeline integrity management address environmental concerns.
Well, the licensing process in the U.S. is pretty strict. No, even if Trump streamlines and requests urgency and so on, you can be sure that it's still going to be technical unless things change completely from now on. I don't believe that they will to that extent. They may be streamlined, they may be faster, and I do believe that some projects, some pipeline projects, will be uh, uh, going forward, whereas they were stalled before. And I think that is actually good. It's not because I want to destroy any habitat with a pipeline. And you have to understand this. Pipeline companies are also very aware of their environmental footprint
Yeah,
and of any
uh,
problems they may
yeah,
produce,
but
which would cost them billions.
yeah, but what's the reason that the pipeline from Canada to the U.S. was canceled 4 or 5 years ago?
Exactly. Environmental concerns, I would suggest, may be somewhat exaggerated, but because of environmental concerns. Whereas if you try to be more reasonable and say, yes, there are impacts, there's impacts of everything. If you don't have a pipeline, you're going to burn different fuels, you have costs in transportation, logistical costs of the economy. So all of these things have to be considered. And I
Yeah,
think that licensing was only considering environmental
yeah,
issues locally.
okay, Cleveland. But if we do not have these pipelines, we will do this movement by ships, by cargo ships.
Maybe we won't even do that and we will use different sources. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is
So
expensive to
you
the
are only
economy.
transferring one problem to another one.
Yeah. But even if you decide to use oil from a different source, Canadian oil does have a larger environmental footprint than US oil. So
Yeah.
to some extent, you could say leaving Canadian oil out is actually good from an environmental standpoint. It may not be good from a logistical standpoint,
Yeah, that's right.
addressing needs of communities, but from an environmental footprint. So this is what I'm saying. In general, any pipeline, if it passes muster in most environmental assessments, is much preferable to the alternative of not having the pipeline, which is very costly to the economy, including in environmental footprint. So you
Yeah.
have to be very
Okay.
careful when you're overly strict on licensing pipelines because that is very costly, not only financially,
Yeah.
monetarily, but an environmental footprint elsewhere.
Yeah. That's right. This is the last point I have, but of course you can bring other that you have. Uh, 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 Problems with agriculture and areas like that, tourism. How do you see this? I do not see this impact so big.
Well, the oil and gas industry has coexisted with uh, tourism, fishing industry, and so on in the Gulf of Mexico. It has done so in Brazil,
Gulf of
several
America,
states.
please. Let me repair. Gulf of America,
Yeah,
not
I'm
Gulf of
sorry,
Mexico anymore.
I'm behind the times. But it has coexisted with other industries, and in fact, it is mindful of its influence, its footprint on local communities. Again, not because they're saints, but because they know that if they don't do the right thing, they'll get sued, and then they'll have to pay billions of dollars. So they don't want to have to provide indemnity assessments to fisheries that aren't producing fish or to tourism industry that's destroyed. They know that they have to coexist in local communities with other
Yes.
activities. That's been going on for years, and I think the oil and gas industry has become quite expert at dealing with these issues. And of course, each one is pushing things one way or the other, but it is not going to destroy fishing
No.
industry because it
Yeah,
knows that is not in its interest.
that's right. Any other point you have, pros and cons
Well,
related
I
to
just wanted
drill, baby,
to
drill?
bring up one thing. You know, people say that if you have more oil, you could have more fossil fuel dependency. And I wanted to bring this up because many of the people who are dead set against the fossil fuels and the fossil fuel industry, the oil and gas industry, say, oh, we have to stop. And if we continue, this just creates dependency. And I would argue that dependency is really related to the cost of the energy that's provided. So the oil and gas industry provides oil and especially gas at very cheap prices, so much so that the industrial complex in the US Gulf is growing tremendously and it's far outstripped and there's reshoring and everything going on. And the opposite is true in Europe where gas prices in particular went up.
And do
Industry
not
became
forget, and please do not
uncompetitive.
forget petrochemical products that are
Yeah, exactly.
totally
In Europe,
dependence.
yeah, in Europe nowadays, there's just no competitive possibility to have petrochemical industries. If they have them, it's just because they haven't dismantled them and so on. But they're not competitive, and they can't be competitive
Yeah.
because U.S. Petrochemical industry is working on three times, not 30%, three times less cost for energy, and sometimes more than three times for feed stocks that are essential for that industry, and many others as well. So this dependency is balderdash. Now, there's one other aspect that's important to bring out is that dependency, like I said, it goes along with prices. If prices were to become low forever, of course, we would continue to depend on fossil fuels because clean energies and net zero is not going to change that. Dollars of cost is what changes policies.
So do you believe that is he right to call for drill, baby, drill?
No, I don't think that helps. I think that the policies that help are the policies that I mentioned. Facilitate some licensing where environmental concerns were overblown, especially logistics. I don't even believe some areas being opened up are going to be interesting to the oil industry. You could open up the North Pole. So what? No one is going to go there, not even the Russians, because they can't even afford that, even though they say they will. So one thing is to open up areas. The other thing is, are oil and gas industries, companies interested in those areas? The areas that they're interested in is the shale patch and the Gulf of America, not anywhere else. And if that is the case, you don't need this DBD. But there's one other thing. There's some clouds out further out because oil and gas dependency can be done away with
So
relatively quickly if alternative energies come down in price. And in
so
fact, that is what's happening. Solar
so
is already near 1 or 2 cents
okay.
kilowatt
So
hour,
do
and
do,
other
do
energies can come close to that. And if
okay.
we have
So do
continued
you agree
advances in
with
battery,
drill, baby, drill? Do you agree
no,
with this?
because this is not changing anything. The things that
Oh,
change are
good point.
policies operational. And we can't do anything about the competitive advantages that alternative energies will achieve on
Okay.
technology, based on
Okay,
technology.
I
No
got the
one
point.
can help that.
Perfect.
Unfortunately for the oil and gas industry, but it still has much room to grow, many years to exist. So it doesn't have to lament anything. But
Yeah.
other energies will make inroads regardless.
Thank you
That's
so
what I
much, Professor Cleveland Jones. Drill, baby, drill. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll continue to hear that.
Yeah. Thank you so
Take
much.
care.
Have a good
Bye.
day. Yeah, take care.
Bye-bye.